All right, Bart Frazier has been program director at the Future of Freedom Foundation for the past 7 years. He holds a BS degree in economics from George Mason University. In addition to planning and coordinating FFF's programs, Bart is also in charge of maintaining our website, as well as putting together our daily FFF email update, which we have strived to make for many years, as long as Bart has been with FFF, the finest, if not at least one of the finest, daily libertarian email updates on the internet. Bart is also a great writer. He's a frequent contributor to our journal, Freedom Daily. Please welcome Bart Frazier.
Said, I'm program director here at the Future of Freedom Foundation. And one of the best parts of being program director is working on FFF Email Update. It's our free internet newsletter. Goes out every day except for Sundays, and I imagine most of you in this room already get it. But if you don't, I highly recommend it. You can sign up for it at the registration table. It's free. But in addition to all of our original work, it also has a collection of articles that we call from newspapers and other libertarian sites like LouRockwell.com, Anti-War, Reason, and others. And we spend our mornings, Jacob and I, we arrive at 6 in the morning combing the internet for these articles. It takes about 2 hours every morning. A lot of work goes into them. So I want to thank all of you. Because of you, I get to read newspapers for a living. That's very nice. Thank you. But because of this job, I've become very familiar with current events, and my job has also coincided with the war on terrorism. I started as an intern at FFF in the spring of 2001 and came on full-time that fall, right about the time of 9/11. And I have learned through my job that the government has just done some very, very horrible things over the course of the past 6-7 years. So consider my talk today kind of a memory test. So much has happened in the past 6-7 years since 9/11 that it is almost impossible to retain it all. You've heard some of it today from Jim Bovard and Robert Higgs, Lou Rockwell, and Jacob, of course. But so much has happened, it's impossible to remember. So anybody remember terms like extraordinary rendition, spider holes, mission accomplished, the war will pay for itself? So these are the things that I'm going to go over today. And of course, it all began with the attacks on 9/11 itself. Terrorists attacked the World Trade Center in New York, as well as the Pentagon in Washington, D.C. And the first fact to remember is that we never declared war. The U.S. Congress never declared war on Iraq or Afghanistan. We went into Afghanistan a month after the attacks and into Iraq about 1.5 years later. But we never declared war. Now, this, of course, is no big surprise. Congress has not declared war on any country since World War II. Yet tens of thousands of American soldiers, as well as millions of foreign civilians, have died through the actions of the U.S. military since then in Korea and Vietnam and Iraq and a multitude of other smaller skirmishes. And not once have we declared war. We've had police actions, but the president has pretty much had the power to take us to war. Now, the House did pass a week after 9/11 the authorization for use of military force against terrorists that read in part that the president is authorized to use all necessary and appropriate force against those nations, organizations, or persons he determines planned, authorized, committed, or aided the terrorist attacks that occurred on September 11th. Well, this is clearly not a declaration of war, and in fact, it's just simply passing the buck. Congressmen did not want to look weak on terrorism, and they did not want to take on the responsibility of declaring war, so they gave the president all the power he wanted, and absolved all of theirs. So, fact to remember, U.S. Congress never declared war. So, attack we did. We went into Afghanistan with the ostensible goal of finding and perhaps killing Osama bin Laden. So, fact to remember number 2, most people don't remember that Osama bin Laden is a former ally of ours. When the Soviets invaded Afghanistan in 1979, the Carter administration, and in particular Zbigniew Brzezinski, wanted to give the Soviets their Vietnam, and they did so in spades. Using the CIA, they funneled monies and weapons to the Afghan freedom fighters known as the Mujahideen. And one of the primary conduits for funneling these monies and weapons was Osama bin Laden. So he was our buddy, he was our pal, we had a common enemy, he was our ally, and of course he is now enemy of the state number 1. So fact to remember, Osama bin Laden was our ally. So that brings us to Iraq. Not long afterwards, we attacked yet another ally of ours. Fact to remember, in the 1980s, Saddam Hussein was our ally. As you heard earlier today, we aided them in their war against Iran. There's a famous picture of Donald Rumsfeld taken in 1983 shaking hands with Saddam Hussein. And I'm sure the government would love to wipe that picture from history if they could, but thanks to the internet, anybody can find it. Just Google Rumsfeld, Hussein, and photo, and it'll pop up on a multitude of websites. Rumsfeld then was the special envoy to the Middle East. And of course, he wasn't Secretary of Defense then. What the special envoy meant was he was the liaison between our government and the Iraqi government. And he brought Hussein all kinds of gifts. He brought him a pair of military-grade pistols, brought him a pair of golden boot spurs. So again, this was our buddy, our friend, who we then, of course, attacked after 9/11. So of the 2 countries that we attacked, they were both our former allies. Now, going into Afghanistan, the reason for it was easy for the administration to justify. Osama bin Laden was there, and he was the mastermind behind the 9/11 attacks. But Iraq was a little harder. There were really no connections between the attacks and Iraq. None of the people on the planes were Iraqis. But so they needed a rationale for going in. And of course, everybody remembers weapons of mass destruction, WMD. The administration provided a multitude of evidence for weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. The first thing that they claimed was that Iraq had tried to purchase uranium yellowcake from Niger. Now, this later proved to be false. Joseph Wilson, a career diplomat, was sent to Niger by the CIA to investigate these claims. And he found that there was no evidence for these claims whatsoever. And I don't know if anybody remembers Valerie Plame, but that was Joseph Wilson's wife, who was an undercover CIA agent who the administration leaked her identity to the press and effectively destroyed her career. They also claimed that Iraq had made large purchases of aluminum tubing in 2000 that were claimed to be part of a centrifuge to manufacture enriched uranium. It was later proved that those claims were false. They did make the purchase, but it turns out that the aluminum tubing was used for conventional weapons manufacture, most likely handheld rockets. And the big one that most people would probably remember from Colin Powell's testimony before the UN were the trucks that were supposed biological weapons manufacturing.